The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority is using Google AI to create smarter tolling systems and improve traffic flow for Texans. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
From the University of Oregon's Agora Journalism Center, this is the Listeners Podcast. Welcome back to Oregon Speaks, Voices from This Moment, a special season of the Listeners Podcast produced by the graduate students at the University of Oregon. I'm Andrew Devayal, the director of the Agora Journalism Center and a professor at U of O's School of Journalism and Communication. In this season, we're exploring how Oregonians are navigating this moment of transition through stories of uncertainty, mutual aid, resilience, and care. Let's listen in.
Hello, my name's Dakota Rain Trapp, and I'm here with the host of today's podcast, Daniel Bloomfield.
Hi, Dakota.
Hey, so tell us, who did you speak with and what did you talk about?
Thanks, Dakota. Well, I had the pleasure of speaking with Adam Davis, who is the executive director of the Oregon Council for the Humanities. We spoke about the recent cuts by the Trump administration to the funding for the National Endowment for the Humanities and how that has impacted the work that Oregon Humanities is doing day to day, but also some of the things about which Adam feels hopeful in light of the spending cuts. Let's listen in.
My name's Adam Davis, and my formal role is the executive director of an organization called Oregon Humanities.
And what does on the national level, what do the humanities do? What do they focus on?
Well, so there's a federal agency called the National Endowment for the Humanities, which was created in the mid-'60s, same time as the National Endowment for the Arts, so sort of sister agencies, I believe created as a kind of response to Cold War investment in science and technology, when a lot of people felt like, okay, it's good we're putting federal money into science and tech, but let's also think about the arts and humanities. So these federal agencies were created. And if you look at the statute, which is a really interesting statute, it talks about the need for wisdom and vision in the citizens of the country. So it's kind of lofty language. But then it took them several years to figure out, how does a federal agency do the work on the ground? And in the early 70s, they started experimenting with state affiliates. And Oregon was one of the first sort of volunteer committee-led models. And that led to state humanities councils that are nonprofits in each of these different states and territories. So in Guam and in the Northern Marianas Islands and in Puerto Rico and in D.C., as well as in all the states, there are these state and territorial or jurisdictional humanities councils, all of which in their own ways are trying to get people reflecting together, thinking together, listening to each other, understanding where we came from in order to think more about where we are and where we're headed.
I saw on your website that there are some core values that was it just the state, the Oregon Humanities that hold those values, or is that a nationally shared?
So the thing is, each state council is an independent nonprofit, which means it's a federation rather than being really centralized. So we have our own board, we have our own mission, our own vision, and our own chosen set of values. So those, I think they overlap in some ways with what some other state councils are interested in, but our board and staff worked on those together. So they're Oregon Humanities core values. The word that is common to all of us is humanities. And one thing that's interesting is different state councils will think about it differently. At the national level, the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, talks about the disciplines of the humanities. It could be art, history, literature, philosophy, all the things that on a college campus like this will get put in a humanities department. I also think there's been a bit of a move to take very seriously the adjective in front of humanities, which is public humanities. What does it mean to be a public humanities organization? And for me, what I like about being a public humanities organization, it means bringing the tools of the humanities to bear, not just in public, but on what it means to live together as a public. So I think of the humanities as asking questions about how we live together. And that's what I think many councils are trying to do, sometimes with more of an emphasis on the past, sometimes really thinking about what we're up to right now.
So before the Trump administration decided to cut, what was it, almost half of your funding, has there been any cultural opposition, any organizations who have tried to do that in the past?
Certainly during the first Trump administration, every year that the administration put out the president's budget, it called for the elimination of the NEH. And every year, Congress, both sides of the aisle, supported there being budget for these agencies because of the work we're doing that clearly matters to the people of the country, no matter their political beliefs.
Have you seen that kind of support coming out in opposition of the executive branches?
I would say in Oregon, for starters, we have an incredibly supportive delegation. And just yesterday, I was at an event with Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, who's a leader nationally with arts and humanities. She's flat out one of the leaders in supporting this stuff. And Senators Merkley and Wyden are also quite supportive. Not the whole congressional delegation, but actually most of the delegation in Oregon is very supportive with their votes and signing on to Dear Colleague letters and all sorts of things. And nationally, one of the interesting things that's happened since the NEH cuts is being even more connected to people in other state humanities councils. So I'm in very regular contact with my colleagues in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Minnesota, Idaho, and some of these are very red states, some are very blue states, some are purple, and I think there are supporters in Congress in just about all of those states. So what we're trying to do is help them see how this work is community work, not partisan work.
Would you say it's one of those uniting issues, like them trying to eliminate the Forest Service, for example, and try to sell off federal land to public or private institutions?
Yeah, it's interesting to think of what issues are uniting these days. I mean, it is true that the Park Service and the Forest Service are, as far as I can tell, trusted more than many other agencies and institutions right now. I think the humanities probably doesn't rise to that level of people saying, yeah, great stuff. Like there's something about the word park where you go, oh yeah, that's where I used to go fishing, or I used to go hiking, or my family would go picnic. I think when people hear the word humanities, they think, college? English class, that was kind of hard. So I think it's really important for us to just let the work speak for itself and keep showing that, leave the fancy word aside, even leave the idea of a Ivy-laden college campus aside, and think about how do you talk to people in your town about the stuff that you might not right away agree on, but you still know you care about each other and you both care about your community. And I think the more that is what stands at the front of Oregon Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities, the clearer it will be why this is necessary to support.
So has that aspect of your work been at all challenged, the whole conversation facilitation training?
So it hasn't, I would say training people to lead conversations has not been challenged as directly. Instead, what happens is the conditions to do it get challenged. So we do that training all over the country. Other state humanities councils bring us in because we've sort of developed a reputation as a leader in that area. When you take funding away from all the different state humanities councils, it's very hard for them to build programs and bring in new facilitators and train those facilitators. So that's the way it's been challenged. I will say that just a couple months ago, we went to the Northern Marianas Islands, to Saipan, and ran a 3-day training there for people from a couple different islands, run trainings in Colorado, New York, all over the country, and those are all going to be challenged by the cuts for sure. And that means dozens of people in each of those states who don't have the opportunity to connect with each other and develop skills in getting their communities talking.
Have you had to cancel any events that you had planned?
Oh, sure. We've canceled. The first thing we canceled was the next round of public program grants programs. So that currently is suspended. But that means that small libraries, community colleges, churches, other organizations that generally might apply are not able to get funding from us for that. We're canceling some community conversations. We're making hard decisions about what we can afford to do and can't afford to do so that we can endure for the long term. More than a third of other humanities councils, so I would say probably between 20 and 25, are very dependent on the federal government. And those cuts mean that what those 20 to 25 councils are doing is getting ready to close up or go into hibernation. That's not the situation we're in, but it is true for many of my peer councils.
And that's 20 to 25 states.
Or territories. So we're talking about small places like the Wyoming Council, but also California and New York, huge states where they too are thinking, are we going to be able to survive this? So the impact is serious.
What do we stand to lose at large, and what do you feel the timeline is for those losses?
Yeah. On a broad level, what we stand to lose is more opportunities to connect with, especially across differences of background and belief, at a time when we need as many opportunities for that as possible. When you get a little bit more granular, we lose the chance for people to be involved with this stuff, both as participants and as practitioners. And then I think you lose some community capacity to have these kinds of conversations, which communities depend on. And in a time when there's less trust in public institutions of various kinds, to have people around who build trust and get people trusting each other, we simply need more of that, not less. And then, of course, some people's lives are very dramatically affected by losing a job or losing the key grant that supported what your organization was about to do. So there's lots of ways that, both large and small, that these cuts affect both the big picture and the very small picture. I don't think the humanities as a sort of abstract field goes away. The challenge is it's the people in the organizations doing the work on the ground that either go away or have to do things in radically different ways. And we're going to see, like, when does a community start to notice that it's not gathering in the way it used to gather? That people aren't hearing perspectives other than their own. I mean, in a way, our country reflects that there's not enough of this. And so I think that's going to be exaggerated. It's going to be heightened. The polarization is, which is already serious. The tools to fight against it. Again, we need more, not less of that.
So though it was something that was founded by the federal government is often an institution that challenges the humanities and the work that it does. Mm. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so that's a nice question, and it's an interesting thing to think, like, what was going on in 1965 that led to the creation of these two endowments and the language that said we need to give everybody that lives here a chance to learn more, get their voice in the mix, and we need to support it, even if we're supporting it only at the level of less than $1 a person a year. And then at a certain point, really probably building off the 80s, there's been a shift to saying government is not any part of the solution, it's more part of the problem. And I think that's what we're feeling now, is that there's a kind of confidence in presumably the corporate world to handle our community questions better than federal government might. I don't share that confidence, and I think it's important not only because I think the federal dollars are important in this work. I think it's important for the federal government to take that responsibility seriously and to say community matters, getting people talking to each other matters, and if we're going to have a truly participatory democracy, it can't just be on election day. It can't just be when people are serving in a jury. It has to be more part of the everyday fabric, that we're connecting with each other and thinking about the communities we live in. And that's why we should support this work.
So what institutions, and a lot of people talk about how the billionaires are in control of the federal government now. Is it capitalist institutions that stand to gain something from promotion of division and not promoting community values?
It's a little bit of a mystery to me, to understand the benefits fear-driven othering efforts. I do think there's a kind of sensational quality to some of this stuff where if I say I don't like that person, it gives me something to connect to with the person next to me. It's the easiest, most dangerous form of building unity, is unity against some imagined other. And sure, there are always benefits to people who can use that kind of thinking. In many cases, or in some cases, corporations or the people at the tops of those corporations benefit, but it's also how nationalism works. And, group dynamics are complicated, and that's part of, I think, the appeal of othering folks is it seems simpler.
In what ways are you optimistic about community thriving? Do you see communities coming together over this issue? We talked about it somewhat earlier.
Yeah. I feel optimistic in lots of ways. I don't know if that makes me naive for saying so, or it means that I'm coming from a slice of work that is weirdly encouraging. But when I think about the national work I'm doing with my colleagues in other states, seeing the way people are working together and the way people are stepping into and revealing kinds of expertise that I didn't know they had, whether it's in the area of fundraising or building relationships with media organizations or litigation or connecting with Congress people or thinking creatively about how to structure their organizations or sharing ideas about programs. Like it's actually ramped up since we got that strange late night email 6 weeks ago. So that's on the federal level. I also think we're starting to see every day more people saying, actually, like, these values matter to us. And it's not just the decisions that the executive branch has been trying to put into practice, but it's the way they've been doing it, which doesn't honor the work people have put in over the course of their lives. So I think there's resistance to both of those efforts. Here in Oregon, I feel every day when I think about the people I work with, both the folks on staff, our board, the subcontractors we talked about, the community members that get together to talk about hard stuff, I feel encouraged all the time. And that's often across differences of background and belief that they share a commitment to making their communities better.
Do you come across people who are in blind support of what the executive branch is doing, and what do you hear them say their reasons are?
Yeah, I don't think they would characterize it as blind support. I think they would say support. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, I think sometimes that support comes in the form of, or is motivated by a sense that we shouldn't trust the government to do stuff, and I support this government's effort to peel back overreach. That's one thing that I hear. I think, you could pick an issue. And I think what's important is to move from being stuck on an idea because it's who I read. It's what I read says is the right thing, to being open to hearing, why do you care about it in the way you care about it? Why do you think this is the way we should be structured? And I actually think most people, when they're in a room with other folks, if you give them the opportunity to, let's take guns for a minute, if instead of saying should a certain kind of gun be legal or not, like that, if you start there, everyone's already dug in. But if you start with a question like, tell me about a time you felt really safe in your community, and what were the conditions that led to your feeling safe? Now tell me about a time where you felt unsafe in your community. And if the two of us talk about that kind of thing, rooted in our experience, one thing it shows is that we both care about safe communities. And that if we have a disagreement about guns, it's actually on top of our shared commitment to safe community. And so we can figure out the details. But what's important is recognizing we're similar and that we care about some deep bedrock thing in similar ways.
And have you been able to find common ground between people who support and don't support the cutting of the funds to start that conversation?
So, I can give you one very concrete example. This was a few weeks ago, I was on Lars Larson's show, which is a self-identified, I think, right-wing show, and I think Larson was trying to, from the get-go, vindicate the idea that the federal government should not be involved in supporting this kind of stuff.
I actually happen to have a clip of that interview right here, which I'll play for our listeners now.
Well, don't take this the wrong way, but all the things you just mentioned, we do on this show every day, and it doesn't take any government money at all. Why should the government be funding this?
I think to spend, as you said, it's a tiny amount of money. It's less than a significant amount less than $1 a person a year that lives in this country to put a little more energy into getting us to trust each other and hear each other, even or especially when we disagree. That feels to me like it's worthwhile. I think we had actually something of a conversation, and my hope is that his listeners also heard that there was a genuine conversation and good reasons to have different perspectives on this. Perspectives might both be valid, even if it'll take some work to find the point of agreement there. I don't think it's useful to see the world in terms, first and foremost, of those that I disagree with and those I agree with. Like when I walk out the door in the morning, I want to see that at least potentially everybody I interact with, there might be things to connect with, whether it's the weather or that the Warriors lost last night or, whatever it is, that there are ways to connect and that actually helps when the disagreements arise. That if we have a personal connection and some level of trust and familiarity, we're more likely to be able to work at the harder stuff, which is going to emerge. We're living in community. It's not just going to be easy, but we got to have something beneath it that we can count on.
Sounds like it's democratic values that you both tend to agree on, and that's a pretty strong uniting power, or they have very strong uniting power within the United States.
Yeah, and the idea that both of our values matter, which is an assumption that is not true in many places and times. But if we both come to the table, even with just that both of our values matter, that's a lot. We're all trying to work together and see where we can help each other out as much as possible.
And how is that looking? What's the strategies you all are implementing?
Well, I could go case by case, but on the fundraising side, we got some good news from the Mellon Foundation, a big national funder, just a couple weeks ago, that they are helping state humanities councils sort of position for sustainability. That was a significant first step, and now we need to build on that. So that's fundraising at the national level for the national community. In terms of advocacy, we're all working very closely with our delegations in our states so that when it comes to budgeting for 2026, the NEH and the NEA are supported. And then when it comes to litigation, I think people are looking to Oregon as leaders because it looks like there is going to be a claim brought and on behalf of the Federation of State Humanities Councils and Oregon Humanities, but it will benefit potentially every council, and that'll be led by a firm based here with Oregon Humanities as one of the two plaintiffs, along with the Federation. And then in the area of communications, we have a really good comms team that's been helping get the word out in lots of ways in close collaboration with that work group that's led by actually Alabama Humanities Council. So again, another example of unlikely and really encouraging partnership.
Yeah, have you had to consolidate your team at all?
Mm-hmm. This is stuff I'm not super happy to have to describe, but we had to lay off 2 positions. Right now, everybody that's still there is in some form of reduced work hours, so about half at 50% and about half at 80%.
And did those funds get cut immediately, or is that a future thing?
I would say they were actually cut retroactively. So it wasn't just the scale, but it was the pace of the cuts. It was as of earlier today, this grant is terminated. Grant that's supposed to run through 2027, with a pattern of grants running for over 50 years. So there's a certain expectation, there's contractual obligations, there's commitments we've made, and all of those, the carpet is pulled out as of earlier on the day of receipt of that email. So it's not the way any thoughtful company or organization would reorganize. I think there are plenty of good reasons to reorganize, plenty of good ways to do it, and I think this is neither.
Well, when we spoke with someone from Southern Oregon PBS, and I understand that CPB and OPB, much less of their funding comes from the federal government than 46%, which is a huge number to me. I think it's more like 11 or 15%. And their strategy has shifted back towards the public instead of having this culture of appeasement. What kind of talk of shifting your strategy back towards the public has there been to increase visibility of what's going on?
We have worked for the last many years to try to increase the public's understanding of the importance of this work and why it matters to have supporters all around the state at all levels. At the same time, when you are receiving federal money, I think you got to be a little careful about saying to individuals or foundations, we also need as much as you can possibly give, because there's some federal support, and you want to be responsible about receiving that, not try to place undue burden on other folks. So in this moment, I think it's a good moment to say, hey, if we want this to last, if we care about it, we got to take more responsibility.
Yeah, it's a really interesting position because it's something founded by the federal government in order to listen to the public, and it makes sense that your support is split right down the middle.
Yeah.
Because it serves both beneficially almost equally, you know? So I wonder why the federal government would want that to go away and why more of the public doesn't notice.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I share your question, and I like how you put it. And I think more of the public is noticing, and we're really seeing that. It takes time, but I am encouraged by the response that I'm seeing both across Oregon and across the country.
And how optimistic are you that the claim that you're filing will actually...
I am ignorant enough about legal matters that I can still be a little bit optimistic. But I'm not in the business of making predictions. I'm also optimistic that Congress will do its job. Yeah.
Is there any misinformation or misconceptions that you're hearing often that you'd like to clear up?
I guess I'd just go back to what you asked before about the humanities, and I'd say I think the way to think about this work is we got to be talking to each other. We got to find ways to trust each other more, and usually that's by talking about the tough stuff together. So I say that to say, I think the misconception is that humanities work might be elite in some way, might reside on a college campus somewhere that is only open to a few, might be the province of experts. And I just flat out disagree with that. I think all of us in our communities have to figure out how to live well together, how to live justly together, how to make sure that everybody feels like they belong. And in order to do that, we need to be able to talk to each other. So that's the biggest misconception that I would want to speak to. And I actually think it's very worthwhile to spend a tiny modicum of tax dollars on creating more opportunities for us to see each other as people. Oregon Humanities is an organization built on the voices of people that live in Oregon, and whether it's people writing stories for the magazine, participating in or leading conversation projects around the state, applying for different fellowships that we support, and then telling stories in those ways. I mean, I would say get involved. Bring a conversation project to your school or library or municipal body. Try to get people talking. So that's one form of support that is easy and usually satisfying, including even writing a letter as part of our Dear Stranger program. Very easy to do and feels great, and you get to know people. And then if it is the kind of thing that you want to support financially, that's great. That's another important form of support. And then I would say, leaving Oregon Humanities aside, I think the big thing is to try to move through community, even in hard times, or especially in hard times, in an open-hearted way. And trying to recognize that everybody's dealing with tough stuff, and it's good to connect.
Right on. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Adam, for taking the time to come here and talk to me and everyone who's listening. This has been Daniel Bloomfield with the University of Oregon. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks to everyone in the class and to Andrew.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of the Listeners Podcast, Oregon Speaks. Thanks so much for listening and for making space for these voices. This season of Listeners is produced by graduate students in the Community Voices course at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. If you appreciated what you heard, we'd love for you to share it with someone in your own community. And if this kind of community-based storytelling speaks to you, if you're curious about how to create podcasts that builds trust and sparks dialogue, we've got something for you. The University of Oregon now offers a community podcasting micro-credential, a flexible, hands-on program designed for anyone looking to amplify local voices through audio storytelling. Whether you're new to podcasting or looking to take your work further, this might be the next step. You can learn more about this program with a link in our show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, keep on listening.